It's so quiet in here right before we start.
Make some noise with that thing.
Bam, bam, bam. Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order. If you'd please rise and join us with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Danny, would you please call roll?
Deputy Mayor Baggett?
Here.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilmember DeCoursey?
Here.
Councilmember Holman?
Here.
Councilmember Pelosa?
Here.
Councilmember Trout-Manuel? Here. And Councilmember Wales?
Here. Thank you. I believe we're supposed to have a legislative update, but I don't see Representative Stokesbury here yet. So if he arrives, we will change the agenda around for him, but we will move on at this point to appointments. And the Airport Advisory Board, City Council to confirm the following appointments to serve on the Airport Advisory Board for 3-year terms expiring December 31st, 2021. Those would be Danielle Butzik, Wayne Osborne, and Sean Morrow. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Pelosa.
Thank you, Mayor. I move happily to see that Danielle Butzik and Wayne Osborne and Sean Morrow be selected for 3-year terms on the Airport Advisory Board.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Holman.
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Pelosa, did you have any additional comments?
Yes, I do. When I've attended the Airport Advisory Board's meeting at 7:30 a.m. in the morning as a citizen, Danielle has been there, Wayne Osborne has been there. Sean Morrow, I don't know I don't think he's here. Anyway, of course, Wayne Osborne, he comes with a great deal of background, retiring from the FAA, a former council member, and also he is a former member of the advisory board itself. And Danielle, when she has attended, she's been very supportive and contributed to the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the appointments to the Airport Advisory Board for 3-year term expiring December 31st, 2021, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed say no. Passes. And for those of you, I know Wayne is here tonight. Wayne, thank you for your continued willingness to serve in volunteer capacities. We miss you on the council, but we appreciate your willingness to serve in a volunteer capacity. All right, we will move back to presentations, and I see that our representative from the 31st, Drew Stokesbury, has joined us. Drew, if you'd like to come forward, the podium is yours. And thank you for being here to give us an update tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you all for having me, and I am very impressed at how you make these trains run on time. I thought I got here right at 7, and you guys are already on number 3 on the agenda, so well done. I don't know if you guys do this here, but in Olympia, I always get yelled at if I don't say, for the record, my name is State Representative Drew Stokesbury. I have the tremendous privilege of representing the 31st Legislative District in Olympia, which includes the south half of Auburn, where I live, at the bottom of Lakeland Hills. Was asked to come and give you all a brief update on what happened this past legislative session. From a personal perspective, it was a great session simply because we got out on time. That was the first time that's happened since my 4 sessions in Olympia, and I think maybe just the second time since about 2007 or so. For a long time, we had declining state revenue, and it took a long time to sort that out. Then we had different parties controlling each chamber, and it took a long time for them to come to agreement. But this time we got it on time, so that was a big positive. One of the things that happened at the very start of session was the legislature passed the capital budget, which did not pass last year for the first time in a very long time. It got held up in really difficult, intense negotiations regarding the Hearst decision and the Foster decision. For those unaware, Hearst was extremely important to rural landowners, and Foster is extremely important to a lot of cities. And both of them dealing with water are extremely important to folks who, other folks who depend on water, whether it's landowners, farmers, Indian tribes, environmentalists, fishermen. So it was very difficult to come to an agreement on those issues, but we finally did, about a year too late, but we finally did. And then probably maybe the second week of session, we passed that, some of those fixes, and we passed the capital budget as well. The capital budget, I'm excited to share, if you didn't already know, it was a pretty good budget for Auburn. It includes $500,000 for Nexus Youth and Family Services. I think I've finally broken my AYR habit. $500,000 for Nexus Youth and Family Services to build a homeless and behavioral health treatment facility, and another $600,000 or $700,000 for the Auburn YMCA to help fund their campus expansion project. And I understand that the city is considering participating in that as well. And as your state legislator, I encourage you to join with the state in doing that. The capital budget also provides matching funds to school districts for school construction if they meet certain criteria. And so there's about $17 million in the budget to Auburn School District to match funds for the replacement of Olympic Middle School. I am sorry, I made a list of the things I wanted to mention. I got a new phone today, and it keeps turning off about every 5 seconds.
Technology is wonderful.
Fixed that setting yet. A couple other issues that I think are important to cities. There's a variety of efforts that had a lot of merits, but also would have increased cities' liability a lot. First, with respect to law enforcement and firefighter, occupational disease matters, and another with regard to wrongful death lawsuits. I supported some of those. I didn't support other of those, but at the end of the day, none of them passed. So from a liability perspective, there really wasn't much additional liability added to cities this year. As we all know, I think I've talked with just about every one of you individually. We hear from all of our constituents. Homelessness is a growing problem. It's not an urban or Seattle problem. It's a regional problem and requires a regional solution. We made some headway on that. Certainly have not solved the problem by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a growing acknowledgement that it's a regional problem and not a specific city's problem. The document recording fee, which has been it's been around forever, but it's always a temporary fee the legislature has to renew. That was made permanent this year. And there was a number of other investments in homelessness and mental health made in the capital budget. There's also a really interesting pilot project that was funded in Snohomish County that involves about a year-long effort of attempts to coordinate between all of the various organizations that deal with these issues. And, as we're all learning, so much of it is connected. Not every homeless person has a behavioral health disorder. Not every person with a behavioral health disorder is homeless, but they're connected, and same thing with substance use disorders. So there's a lot of connectivity there. And so Snohomish County spent about a year trying to develop a way to integrate all of those treatment options in the community a lot better than they have in anybody's done in the past, where it's all been siloized. And that was funded in the in the operating budget. And I'm optimistic that in a year or two they'll be able to show what we've all been theorizing, that a lot of these things work a lot better when there's sort of a continuity there, and that'll provide enough impetus for us in Olympia to do a better job integrating those things. As you all well know, the state hasn't done the greatest job sharing its tax revenue with you all, particularly with regard to marijuana revenue and liquor tax revenue. The good news, I guess, is that we didn't raid any of the money this year. The bad news is the amount of marijuana revenue we're sharing probably still doesn't cover all of the costs we're asking our local law enforcement to deal with in terms of enforcing public prohibitions against smoking, dealing with all of the licensing issues. There's still illegal grow operations. And then same thing on the liquor side, it still really hasn't restored the ratio that existed before privatization, and both of those are personal priorities of mine, but just as your budget negotiations can be difficult, I imagine, ours can too, and it can be difficult to convince my colleagues to give up money on the table. Two other things I just wanted to hit on really briefly. One thing that did pass is the Voting Rights Act, the Washington State Voting Rights Act, which is an extremely noble endeavor, I think, to encourage participation in our democratic process and also ensure that all members of all communities have their voices heard and are able to elect people that agree with them on issues. I had some concerns personally with how the State Voting Rights Act was implemented. I'm nervous about its impact on small cities. Auburn is not quite a small city. We've got a lot of other really small cities in the 31st Legislative District. But it opens up the door that at some point somebody could be upset with the way elections have turned out in Auburn and file a lawsuit against the city that would force the city to sort of undergo a costly process. Remains to be seen sort of what that looks like on the ground. My personal fear was for cities like Wilkeson and Carbonado that I also represent that have a couple hundred people, and it takes, the 5 city council members, it takes all the effort in the world just to convince a qualified person to run for office when one of them retires. Thankfully Auburn is big enough that we've got a lot of qualified people to serve, and I can't imagine the last time there was a city council race that went vacant. But in theory, if you divide the district into the city into 7 districts, the pool of people is a lot smaller, and while you might be making it easier for folks to elect somebody they agree with, you might make it more difficult for them to elect a qualified person because there's no qualified people that want to put in all the hard work that you guys for some reason agree to do. And then the last thing that I wanted to point out was the use of deadly force bill. And that's in a bit of legal purgatory right now, I guess, for lack of a better word. For those that don't know, Washington is a bit of an outlier from other states in terms of when police officers can be charged in an officer-involved shooting. There is a tremendous effort that was funded by a lot of folks around the state to change that law. As is often the case with initiatives, while it's a great tool for the citizenry, they sometimes don't undergo all of the diligence that legislation undergoes. Practically every initiative of substance in the last 10 years has had to be amended by the legislature, whether it was a issue I agreed with at the beginning or disagreed with at the beginning. They almost all need some work to make technical changes, and the same thing was true of this initiative, I-940. Because the legislature reached an agreement on fixing some of these technical issues so late in session, our hands were a bit tied procedurally. The legislature attempted to pass a bill before it passed the initiative to preemptively amend the initiative and get around the requirement of a 2/3 vote to amend an initiative. It was sort of a novel reading of the Constitution, and it's unclear how the Supreme Court will come down on that. So there's a variety of possibilities, all of which probably involve a change to liability for police departments at some point in the next couple of years, but precisely what those changes look like and how quickly they get implemented, we kind of got to wait and see. So that, in a 60-day session, we don't really get a whole lot done, but we finished on time. We made some things better. We made a little bit of progress towards other things. And I guess the last thing I'll share, too, on a personal note, I was elected House Republican floor leader at the very end of session. I got a little tired of the district to the north having so many Auburn residents in legislative leadership that I thought that perhaps the south end of Auburn deserved its representative to be in leadership as well. So anyway, it's been an honor to represent you. Happy to answer any questions if you have them, but thanks for the time.
Thank you, Drew. And we are proud that we have such strong representation in the city of Auburn, whether it be the 30th, the 40th, 7th, or the 31st. And one other thing that I don't believe you mentioned that you helped us on is $1.5 million capital expenditure that we were able to secure with your help. That was in the capital budget that was passed for a homelessness representation project, and that will be down at Valley Cities. It's modular units that will assist. There'll be 13 units that are put in place, and so when we came down, a little bit frantic because it wasn't. It was supposed to go our way, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. You were instrumental in helping us make sure that we secured that, so thank you very much for
Absolutely.
that. Council, does anyone have any questions for Representative Stokesbury? Councilmember Brown.
Yes, thank you, Representative Stokesbury, for being here tonight. I was curious, you didn't mention the issue of the Public Records Act, and it was, I think probably a difficult situation for a lot of legislators. Can you talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was trying to focus on things that were directly impactful to cities. This being the Public Records Act with respect to the legislature, didn't mean to overlook its importance to the state, but by any means. You're right, it was an extremely difficult issue. I mentioned a minute ago, there was some, because of the last minute nature of the deadly force bill, we tried some we as the legislature, not me personally, tried some novel things to try to get it through. That in a similar way, the same thing happened with the Legislative Public Records Act. Certainly in hindsight, I think it was a tremendous mistake. I voted for it reluctantly. I thought that a lot of the policies were in a good step, not all of them. This is, as a legislator, something we deal with all of the time. I can imagine it's like this for cities a lot. If you want to go a mile and the bill or ordinance before you goes a foot, do you vote yes because you got to take that first foot forward before you can get the mile? Or do you vote no sort of out of principle and say, I'm not going to provide cover to this nothingness in the scheme of things with my reputation, because what we really need is the whole mile, not the foot. And that's the fundamental issue that confronts legislators on any issue. And that's sort of what was happening here. For as long as I've been in the legislature, which isn't that long, and for a lot longer than that, our attorneys have advised us that the Public Records Act did not apply to the legislature. Reasonable minds can obviously disagree. A lot of newspapers did, and a trial court judge did. But from my perspective, the change was going from a system where our lawyers insisted we didn't need to comply with the Public Records Act to one where we did on some of the most important communications that the public probably has a right to know. Our calendars, who we meet with, how much we're doing on this job, and especially all of our communication with lobbyists, which I think all of that is of high public interest. So from my perspective, I voted for the bill because I thought allowing those things to be public was a step forward from the status quo, which was our lawyers telling us nothing was public. Personally, I would have liked to see more done, and in some ways the governor's veto is, I think, a blessing in disguise, because it will force the legislature to sort of revisit the issue. We have task forces trying to sort out some of these issues in the interim. It's slightly more complicated than it should be, for better or worse. For one example, if you all destroy a public record, you have liability for doing that. Well, we've been told for years you don't have public records, so a lot of folks have deleted emails, not because they have anything to hide. It's just hard to, we get a couple hundred emails a day during session. It's just hard to stay organized, so some folks have decided to delete things they think they don't need anymore. So how do you sort out liability for things that were deleted in the past? We get a lot of constituent communications about, really personal issues. I don't know exactly what you guys get emails about, but I, can imagine the things that I want to talk to city council members about, and it's sort of like, hey, we should lower the speed limit on this street. I get a lot of emails, with really heartfelt stories about why abortion should be expanded or limited, what they feel about the death penalty. And historically, those communications haven't been public, and we're trying to wrestle with, okay, if Joe Smith emails me with his heartfelt story about abortion, one way or the other on the issue, should Joe Smith's life story and his, how he came to the position he came to on abortion. Should that be public? Does he want everybody to know that? Does he have an expectation of privacy? So I'm all for disclosure. It's just a little bit easier said than done, unfortunately.
Thank you, Representative. I would agree, just as somebody that does communicate with legislators, nothing that I would say would I be embarrassed about. But there are situations, and I think that I do think it was a great exercise in active democracy and maybe a little demagoguery as well. But it was a tough situation for legislators, and I think it was handled probably as well as it could be once it happened.
Yeah, and it's certainly a good reminder that we work for the people, and it was actually heartening to see how closely they pay attention. Sometimes we go down there and we wonder if many people outside of our city councils and the lobbyists really know what's going on. I think maybe one time in 4 years I've been recognized on the street, which is great for me, but it sort of makes you wonder, just how engaged the public is. So when they do get engaged on a topic like that, it's encouraging even if they're engaged on the opposite side of you.
Yeah. Public records is a difficult one. We do battle with it every day. In fact, we're looking at having to add additional staff because of the workload that surrounds public records. We certainly want to be transparent, but there are some of those, and we do appreciate that you did address some of the frivolous requests in the previous session, but we believe as well that there is still room to go on those. We want to be able to provide a transparent government and representation, but there are some challenges to some of that. So any other questions? Representative Stokesbury, thank you so much for being a friend of the City of Auburn. We appreciate it. We appreciate you taking your time to join us this evening, and always remember it's that phone works both ways. So if we can help you in any way, don't hesitate.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mayor Bacchus, and Council. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, we will move back to our boards and commissions. Next one is the Auburn Tourism Board. City Council to confirm the following appointments to serve on the Auburn Tourism Board. Karen Sheffield, Best Western Hotel, to fill the unexpired term of Tanya Jones, to expire December 31st, 2020. Malia Dale, Red Lion Hotel, to fill the unexpired term of Ting Fonsingnam, to expire December 31st, 2019, and Chantel Herberger, Gusenko Chocolate, to fill the unexpired term of Karina Sacedo, to expire December 31st, 2020. Do we have a motion? Deputy Mayor Baggett.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that we consider the appointments to serve on the Auburn Tourism Board as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Holman.
Second.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Baggett, anything that you'd like to say?
Well, after reviewing the applications and qualifications of these three individuals, I think that it goes without saying that these three would be very good representatives for the city and for the residents and homeowners here within our city. So I believe that this is a good thing.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the appointments to the Auburn Tourism Board as previously stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Passes. Danny, do we have any agenda modifications?
No, Your Honor.
All right, we have no public hearings this evening. Excuse me, so we will move to audience participation. This is the place on the agenda where the public is invited to speak to the City Council on any issue. Those wishing to speak are reminded to sign in on the form provided. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Anyone like to speak? Final time. All right, we will move on. We have no correspondence this evening. So we will move to Council Ad Hoc Committee reports. Council Ad Hoc Committee chairs may report on the status of their Ad Hoc Council Committee's progress on assigned tasks and may give their recommendations to the City Council, if any. And we will begin with Councilmember Brown on the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. The Finance Committee reviewed the claims vouchers. We reviewed 156 claim vouchers from reports dated 5/30/2018 for a total amount of $1,312,000 and $994. In addition, there were 5 wire transfers in the amount of $711,000 for a grand total of $2 million. All claims were reviewed and were reasonable and in good order.
Thank you. All right, and the Roads Ad Hoc Committee, Councilmember DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. We have not met since our last session, but we are meeting tomorrow afternoon here at City Hall.
Excellent, thank you.
Mayor,
Yes,
if I could complete the report.
I'm
and
sorry, I
Well,
apologize. I
kinda
thought you were done.
paused for a minute and a
Okay.
half, and it was a little longer than I should have. But thank you, Mayor. The payroll vouchers were also reviewed from 5/17 through 5/30. There were 23 checks and 559 direct deposits and associated electronic transfers for tax, retirement, et cetera, totaling about $2.5 million. And the Finance Committee does recommend approval.
thank you. And now, and I don't want to cut you off again, are you
We
completed?
are completed.
You are completed, all right, my apologies. All right, now we will move on to the consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered by the City Council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed. Do we have a motion? Deputy Mayor Baggett.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have 3 items under the consent agenda, the minutes of the May 20, I'm sorry,
move for approval.
move for approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember
Jumped right in
Brown.
there, didn't I?
Second, please.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor Baggett.
Now, here we go. There are 3 items on the consent agenda. Minutes of the May 21st, 2018 City Council meeting, the claims vouchers and the payroll vouchers, which were explained in detail by Councilmember Brown, and they're ready for approval.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Passes. And Shelley, I have the council signature page. I haven't given it to you yet, but I do have that. All right, we have no unfinished business. We have no new business, so we will move to resolutions. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Your Honor. Resolution number 5354, and a resolution of the City Council of the City of Auburn, Washington, setting the time and date for a public hearing before the City Council on the 2019-2024 Transportation Improvement Plan.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember DeCoursey.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 5354.
Thank you. Is there a second? Deputy Mayor Baggett.
I second that, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilmember DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a routine process we go through with the Transportation Improvement Plan, the 6-year TIP, and this is for a public hearing to be proposed and held on June 18th, 2018, during the City Council meeting. The Transportation Improvement Program is required to be amended annually, and last Monday we received a briefing from staff regarding the changes for the TIP for 2018 for the public hearing.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of resolution number 5354, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Passes.
Resolution number 5370, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Auburn, Washington, expressing support for enrollment of parcels 3421059-044 and 3421059-061 into the King County Public Rating System.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember DeCoursey.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 5370.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Brown.
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember DeCoursey.
This was also presented to us at the last study session, and this is a public benefit rating system which allows private property owners to receive tax benefits through a program allowed under the RCWs. And the reductions are for program or properties that will seek to preserve their land, such as agricultural use, surface water, quality buffers, forest stewardship, and public access, and others like that. This particular resolution includes the Messini property, which consists of 2 separate parcels totaling approximately 10 acres. and the owner is seeking enrollment in this program under the Farm and Agricultural Conservation Land category. Interesting item on this is that although this particular property owner does receive a tax benefit, the rest of the property owners in King County must make up the difference of what that tax would be, which we heard was just a matter of pennies when you look at being spread over all the property owners in King County. So it kind of benefits the property owner, but also it's not gratefully impactful, in my opinion, to the rest of the property owners in King County.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of resolution number 5370, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. Passes.
Resolution number 5371, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Auburn, Washington, approving and authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement between the cities of Auburn and Sumner for adjustment of the boundary between the cities of Sumner and Auburn for movement of city boundary, the city boundary to the other side of the roadway, not the railroad, of a portion of right-of-way of Stewart Road and Lake Taps Parkway east of the current city limits pursuant to RCW 3513-310.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember DeCoursey.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 5371.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Trout Manuel.
I second that.
Thank you. Councilmember DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. Everything Attorney Hyde said. Plus, Sumner is looking at redeveloping their former golf course site, and this plan includes the changes to Stewart Road and Lake Taps Parkway East. And city staff has been in communication and contact with Sumner and worked the details out of the basic benefits, which will both serve Auburn and Sumner very well. So this resolution does authorize the mayor to execute the agreement between Auburn and Sumner for the boundary line adjustment.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of Resolution 5371, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. Passes.
Resolution number 5372, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Auburn, Washington, authorizing the mayor to execute a memorandum of understanding with the Washington State Department of Transportation for the purposes of defining the local funding and phasing of Puget Sound Gateway Program.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember DeCoursey.
I think I'll take this one, too. I move for the adoption of Resolution 5372.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Brown.
Second that motion.
Thank you. Councilmember DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. As mentioned, this resolution authorizes the mayor to execute a memorandum of understanding regarding local funding for the phasing of the Puget Sound Gateway Program, which is the State Route 167 and State Route 509 completion projects. This dates back to July of 2015, where the state legislature and the governor acted to fund this program. And the program is comprised of two different projects, including the completion of 167, but also tying in the 509 to the I-5 corridor as well. WashDOT is the lead program sponsor on this, and they are also responsible for the financial management, the planning, and the design and construction of the program. And Auburn is not being asked to provide any direct funding, so it's a good thing for us.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there questions or comments? All those in favor of resolution number 5372, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. Passes.
Resolution number 5373, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Auburn, Washington, approving and authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Small and Sons Oil Distribution Company for fuel services.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Holman.
I've got to give Councilmember
DeCoursey
DeCoursey a
break.
little break here.
Yes.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 5373.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Pelosa.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Councilmember Holman.
This is for a one-year contract between Small and Sons Oil and the City of Auburn for the supply of gasoline and diesel. Auburn needs a regular source of fuel for its municipal operations and fleet, and Small and Sons was the successful bidder. And Small and Sons has been a long-time Auburn business.
Absolutely. We like buying local. Are there any questions or comments? Councilmember Pelosa.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to refer to the resolution, page 63 of 70. The second whereas the city sought proposals from qualified field service providers. And the third whereas, it is to the city's advantage to contract with Small and Sons. I would like to know how many bidders we had. Normally, when we receive a packet like this, we show what bidders, what their pricing was and all this. It's not here. So I don't know if we're getting a good deal or not.
I believe that's typically for a capital project, is it not? When we are approving which bidder we are going to go with on a project? So that's typically for a capital project that
Well,
we see
but
that.
I still would like to know who put bids in and what are the advantages?
So,
I don't have those statistics, but I would mention that sometimes we can request bids and maybe only have one.
Oh, I understand that, Dan. I understand that. But
Ran-
how many
So,
bids did we have?
Randy Bailey is here. Randy will
Randy
provide
will
information.
be able to tell us.
So, thanks for the question. So what we compared this against was state contract. So we went against the state contract, and then we had asked Don Small, who's been our current provider, and so we compared it against the state contract. And they exceeded what state contract was for cheaper.
So we didn't go out and ask other fuel suppliers.
We did not. We went with state contract, and they were able to give us a better deal than state contract.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Right. Are there any other questions? Thank you, Randy. All those in favor of resolution number 5373, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no.
No.
Motion passes. All right, we will move on to mayor and council member reports. At this time, the mayor and city council may report on significant items associated with their appointed positions on federal, state, regional, and local organizations, and we will begin with Deputy Mayor Baggett.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, I attended many different meetings in the last couple of weeks, but I think I'm going to focus just on one. Several of the other council members here and the mayor will probably expound on some of the other meetings because they were in attendance. The Medic One and Emergency Management System Levy Planning Task Force. On Wednesday, May 30th, we convened the second of 4 levy planning task force meetings to review the progress of the 3 committees, which are the Advanced Life Support, or ALS, which are the paramedics, the Basic Life Support, or BLS, the Emergency Management Techs, the technicians, and the Regional Services Group, which handles all of the other administrative sides of this entity. Each committee presented their status and the principal elements that the members are considering for their respective portion that will constitute the taxpayer levy that will be brought before the voters late next year and will cover a 6-year period beginning in 2020 through 2025. This is not a new levy. This is just a continuation of a new one, but every 6 years it is evaluated or reevaluated to make sure that the taxation is fair and equitable for the citizens. It is forecast to be somewhere in the range of between 23 and 28 cents per $1,000 of assessed property values. That's a guesstimate based upon where we are today. I am also a member of the Levy Finance Committee that will ultimately bring forth to the task force the recommendations to send to the King County Council and the voters of King County. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember DeCoursey.
I have no report.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
I have no report.
Councilmember Holman.
No report, Your Honor.
Oh, goodness. Councilmember Trout Manuel.
I was going to say I didn't have any report because I've been ill, but I thought I felt good, well enough to go play bocce on Saturday, and there was a tournament, and we had probably all 4 courts were full, but everyone that was there are saying, when are we going to make Auburn into a bocce city? They only have another course up in King County. We had most of the people that were there playing are from up north. And we got to talking about the cover, because they would like to see a cover. They also have some people from California that were there, and they said that in California they have a cover. And they say they play all year round during the hottest time of the year, even when their lowest cold time is, they're playing all year round. And I mentioned to them, what would it take for them to want, you know, to help the city? And they're all willing to do a fundraiser to see about matching the city to build the cover. We had a lot of people because the park was full. It was a beautiful sunny day. The park was full with families there playing in the park, and we had them coming over and looking at us. We also had one aisle or one lane that was for the teens, and they had probably a lot, 5 playing on that, and they played until they eliminated the last person. Ron and I, we joined the club. We're members now. And this was the first year we played, and we played with some pretty tough people, and we came in. We did okay for our first tournament, but it was a lot of fun. I did lose, but it was fun. But Sal is out here, and he is looking for younger people to take over because he's been doing it for years and years and years. And so we'll see what we can do, but I'm going to bring this back to the council to see how we can work in bringing a cover over the bocce court.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wales. No report, thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Pelosa.
Thank you, Mayor. On May 28th was Memorial Day, and I'm a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Auburn Post 1741. And every year we host, along with the city, a ceremony that respects those that have given all so that we may have freedom in the United States and around the world. So all of our officers in the post are part of the ceremony, and the Boy Scouts parade up, post their colors. The VFW follows, and then the post commander sets forth his leadership in addressing the officers to speak a little role in the ceremony itself. And then in addition, we provide a live wreath, floral wreath, that we leave at the ceremony every year. And we used to have this plastic flower, but we said, hey, we can afford a wreath, a nice flowered wreath. So we started that tradition about 10, 12 years ago. And it's really is nice. And all of the officers were dressed in their blue coats and shirt and tie, and it really was very respectful. And so I came away with that very happy that I am a member of VFW Post 1741 in Auburn that was chartered back in 1929 here in the city. And you can imagine back in 1929 that they undoubtedly had a whole bunch of World War I members in those days. And they had, the VFW had a drum and bugle corps, if you ever feel like seeing some history, go down to the White River Valley Museum and go and page through some of the old newspapers. We used to have a great drum and bugle corps sponsored by VFW and VFW members, played in the band for our different parades that we had at that time in the city of Auburn. So everybody respect your flag. If you see a worn or torn U.S. flag in the city, you contact me, because we replace worn or torn U.S. flags for free. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pelosi. Councilmember Holman?
Madam Mayor, would Councilmember Pelosi entertain a question? Who rang the bell to open this year's farmers market?
A guy named Pelosi.
Thank you.
All right. So a few things the last couple of weeks. On Saturday, May 26th, I attended the 48th graduation of our CERT classes here at City Hall. That's Community Emergency Response Team. And it was another great class full of individuals who are now ready, God forbid, in case of an emergency, that they could help during those times of emergency prior to assistance, first responders being able to arrive on the scene. And so I'm always amazed and impressed by how many people are willing to volunteer for those classes, and we do appreciate them, and again, hope that we never need to utilize their services, but it's nice to know that we have them in case they do. And you probably know this, but the largest concentration of CERT graduates is Wesley Homes. They have a good number of their residents who have taken these classes. And so if anything ever happens in the city of Auburn, you might want to hope that you're up by Wesley Homes. Also, to go back to May 27th, which is a Sunday, it was the Auburn Stakes at Emerald Downs. And I was able to provide the trophy to the winner. And I'm happy to say, for the first time in all the years that I've gone out there, I actually had placed a winning bet on the horse in the sixth race, number 7. What was I thinking? That was the winning horse, and so it was a lot of fun to be able to present the trophy to the owners and the trainers. And then on Monday, as Councilmember Pelosi mentioned, was our Memorial Day services, both at Mountain View Cemetery and also at Veterans Memorial Park. And I want to thank the VFW, the American Legion, and the Intertribal Warriors for their roles in honoring those who had given the ultimate sacrifice for our country. On the 31st, we had the Mental Health Town Hall at the Auburn Community and Events Center. We had roughly a little over 100 people attending in person, but the statistics, because we were streaming it live, 1,933 people saw the live stream. 841 viewed the program. Those were unique views. There were 8 shares, 48 comments, 19 likes, and 4 loves. Audience was 18% men, 82% women. Audience age was 50% between the ages of 45 to 54, 25% between 35 and 44, 15% between 25 and 34, and a few outliers in the 18 to 24 and the 55 to 64 ranges. 98% of the views were from the state of Washington, with a few in California as well. And Jason, who is back behind the mirror right now, making sure that this meeting is being live streamed and also will be put on Channel 21 and YouTube, is working on the YouTube version of the town hall meeting. We had representatives from numerous organizations within our city, including Nexus Youth and Family, Valley Cities, the Auburn Food Bank, Sound Mental Health, King County Library System, and numerous others, Washington Disabilities, And so there were some people in attendance that were actually able to be connected with services at the end of the meeting. And so I am very thankful for those who attended. And Councilmember Pelosi, thank you for being there as well. And then on Friday evening, we had the ribbon cutting for the grand opening of Laser Cutting Northwest. They have been a staple business in our community for a number of years, but we were excited to be there as we were able to cut the ribbon for their newest facilities. And the expansion is going to be of tremendous benefit, not just for Laser Cutting Northwest and all of the startup companies that Pita Tuca helps there, but also benefiting the city of Auburn. And I wanted to talk about the Auburn International Farmers Market. Yesterday was the opening day, as Councilmember Holman mentioned. It was the 10th anniversary of our farmers market, and a huge thank you to Councilmember Pelosi for all of your dedicated years of enthusiasm and hard work to get it started. We did move this year to Les Gove, and the attendance was overwhelming. We were sold out on the booth spaces, and the number of people who attended was probably double any other opening day that we've had, and the vendors were able to, the revenue generated yesterday was $6,000 above the largest day that we've ever had. And so very successful, and we hope that those of you who weren't able to join us yesterday make sure to come on one of the Sundays between now and the end of September. I think you'll like what you see. You'll be able to see it from Auburn Way South. Parking is back on 12th Street, and we're excited to see how many new vendors we have this year. And then just wanted to remind people that live in the southeast part of our city that tomorrow night is our first community picnic. It will be at Game Farm Park at 6 o'clock, and it will be the Kiwanis providing hot dogs and hamburgers tomorrow night. Mr. City Attorney, are we in need of an executive or closed session tonight?
No, we are not, Your Honor.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.